Welcome to Women Can Too. Women all over the world have the ideas, the passion, the knowledge, and the power. All they need now is the opportunity to prove that they can succeed in male-dominated industries. My podcast, a podcast for us, creates a safe space to tell stories, discuss topics, and break down the barriers and stereotypes that are holding women back from their full potential. We hope to inspire more women to chase their professional dreams and have the courage to dream and then make it a reality. Welcome back, everyone, to our third Women Can Too podcast. Thank you again for all the love and support. It is always exciting to hear all the great feedback and the requests for more podcasts. This podcast channel has already had such an impact on my life, and I hope it is all doing the same for you. This podcast is the platform to help knock down those barriers and embrace the power of discussions in various areas of our lives, both personal and professional. Today's episode is called Beautiful Conflict. What a powerful name. This episode is designed to explore the world of conflict and truly understand that conflict does not always have to be seen as arguments that end up in silence, door slamming, resentment, or some see conflict as just what it is. Rather, conflict is the opportunity for it to be beautiful and provide you with powerful reconciliations and opportunities you never thought you would experience through conflict. Conflict can be seen as so much more than what meets the eye. And today we're going to explore this concept further, and our special guest will have the opportunity to interview me. How exciting. So stay tuned. Our special guest on Women Can Too is Paige Young. She is currently the faculty advisor for Departmental Honours Program and the instructor for the Department of Professional Sales at Weber State University. She teaches courses like customer service techniques, sales channels, and introduction to sales and service technologies. Paige is a former graduate from Weber State University with a bachelor degree in professional sales. She currently is pursuing her MBA at WSU as well, which she has recently graduated. Prior to the start of her career in education, Paige worked as a sales manager for the Hampton Inn and Suites by Hilton in Ogden, Utah. During her time there, she received multiple awards for her impact on sales, colleagues, guests, and her community. Her industry experience allowed her to become an expert in each step of the sales cycle. She enjoys working with students on their educational and career goals, along with guiding them to graduation. I'm so proud to have her as my mentor and a friend, and now so lucky to have her on the podcast and hear her insights on beautiful conflict. Welcome, Paige, to Women Can Too. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for joining.
Of course.
Now, before we get started, what does conflict mean to you and how would you define it?
Conflict to me, I think it's definitely something we don't love for sure. I was going to say love-hate relationship, but no, I can't love it at all. But it is definitely inevitable for sure. It's something that's a part of our daily lives. That I think more than we really realize.
I agree. And I think it's something that we should talk about more because we see it all the time. But I think that's it's the negative word that everyone wants to be like, oh, conflict. Like, nope, we can't talk about it.
I don't know a whole lot about it. That's why we got to have NPC people like you out there to help us through it.
I know. What comes to mind when you hear beautiful conflict?
As I said, it's not something that I love, conflict. So to relate it with beautiful, I think that maybe hearing the term is embraced. Maybe whoever came up with this term is to say, hey, we need to embrace conflict because it's inevitable. I wouldn't consider it beautiful, but since it is life and life isn't always beautiful, it makes sense.
I like that. Now, I'm excited to explore this topic further, but first let's jump right into the world of conflict. What types of conflict have you seen in a professional environment?
Types of conflict. I mean, I've seen all sorts. I mean, you've got political conflict where, for instance, I work at a university. So you've got people in rank, right? You've got people with PhDs and doctorate level degrees, and then you've got some staff who may not even have any higher education. And so, it could be a form of political conflict where, it's just based on your rank, and maybe someone isn't heard because they don't have the educational ranking that the other person has.
Well, they don't want to speak up because they're like, oh, I don't have what they have.
They may not, and it may just be internal, right?
Yes.
That, I felt that way too. I think starting in my position, I didn't have my master's degree yet. And so I felt like I didn't have a say at the table sometimes. And that was just my own fault. So I think internal conflict, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think sometimes we can be our worst enemy, and beat ourselves down. And we're having this internal fight that nobody around us knows what's going on. I think so. Yeah. Even gender, right? Same thing. Seat at the table. If you're a female, you may not feel like you should speak about something, just based off the gender that you are. So it all facets of life. There's all sorts of conflict out there every single day in the workplace. And
then as soon as what you just mentioned, and then when we speak up as women, we're seen as crazy or oh, you're too confident in that. It's we don't know how to find the balance anymore because we're finally finding a voice, but it's no one's ever had us speak before. So it's oh, wow, you actually want to talk. It's yes.
Right. Well, it's interesting that you note that because, in one of my leadership classes that I took in my MBA, we learned a lot about how women are supposed to, in the culture and what's expected of us oftentimes is to be, the support role of things, and to be expected to just take demands from people and turn things, into gold and be there to support everybody. And so sometimes when we take that wheel, it's perceived and looked at wrong, and people may be negatively impacted by us being more direct. And there's nothing wrong with it. And we talked about in class that, women do need to speak up more, but they are also those gender roles that are unfortunately there that can cause that internal conflict.
Yeah, I completely agree. Now, what do you think are the main causes for professional conflict?
I would just say communication barriers. We all see the world through different lenses. And that's one thing I think, in my 20s into being, in my 30s now, you really start to realize that we all tick very differently. And so what I see as a glass half full, my husband or a colleague may see as a glass pretty much empty. And so I think that's the difficulty, is trying to find this happy medium so that we all can find a win-win.
I agree. And I think professional environment is also difficult too, because you have some people that talk like they do, like friends outside of other people, and then others you just see the work face. So it's hard to balance those two together.
Right.
And you may not spend a whole lot of time with them and do some companies, professional sales, for you guys, you do a lot of meetings, you guys communicate, and you have your individual offices, but you do a lot of collective things together to make sure that it runs. Other places are in one little office and they don't speak to anyone else. They have their own set of clients and everything. So that's something that balances out as well, that some people have never had to work in a team.
Exactly. Yeah. And I like how you mentioned, some people you can connect with on a personal level, you're really good friends and you understand each other, where some people do live a separate life and they don't want to talk about their personal life at work. And so to me, it's oh, I want everybody to know about my kids and I want to know about their kids, and not everybody is as receptive. And so that's a barrier, right? That's
another conflict.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you feel like conflict has an ongoing effect? Has it had an ongoing effect on you or the company that you've been in?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely does have an ongoing impact as far as how if I let things
fester?
Bother me or fester. Yeah, just the smallest little things. And I have to have a lot of self-talk and go, this person's personality, this is how they see it. And this is, how they understand life to be in these concepts. And this is how I will even think of it as like, this is how they were raised. And so this is why they are the way they are. And that's maybe wrong that I do that, but that just kind of helps me to like not hold in conflict or be bothered and try to just understand people for who they are rather than trying to change them to be like me.
I think that's a good strategy, because if it's not someone that you have a consistent conflict with, say it's like just one scenario, you can think of it like, okay, water off the duck's back. Like this person, we just had conflict, we don't see eye to eye.
Yeah.
But if you never have to deal with them again, then there's no point holding all of that conflict and anger in if you're never going to see them. Now, it's different if you see them all the time and you work with them, then that's when something needs to happen and another conversation needs to.
Especially if it's a non-negotiable, like it's something that, you know, I'm holding on to that I definitely need to have the conversation with, then yeah, absolutely. But sometimes I can be petty. I think we all can. And just be upset about little things that I have to sometimes realize I'm the problem. I think a lot of people struggle with that inner looking and going, what can I do to change this? And yeah, I see the world this way, and I maybe expect too much out of this person because I was raised this way and they were raised this way, and let's come to agree to disagree type of situation.
It's easy to blame somebody else rather than your own type of thing.
Absolutely.
Now, what type of conflict style do you fall into? Is it competing, avoiding, accommodating, or compromise?
I would say that I fall, it depends. Like in my personal life, I avoid. And then in work life, which is kind of what we're more talking about now, depending on the scenario, it would be accommodating or compromising. And sometimes I don't think we want to accommodate or compromise. And I actually, it's interesting. So like, for instance, I'm an advisor, and sometimes, you know, I'm expected to be accommodating, but then when I'm that student's teacher, then, you know, and they want to bring something to my attention, I can't be as accommodating as I was a week ago with them in my advisement meeting with them. And so there's this hard line sometimes that I draw with students where it's like, they think, oh, she's my best friend. We had such a great conversation in this advising scenario. She'll be accommodating on this late work I need to turn in, you know? And so I am held to like certain issues, like ethical conflicts that I'm like, oh, why are you doing this to me? Because now I have to bring out this side of me that I don't normally like to bring out. I want to be accommodating and compromise with you, but sometimes, like, in my syllabus, it says this is the late policy. And so I hate having to stick to that, but I do. And so, yeah, it's conflicting.
Yeah, that's definitely a self one, because you have to put in those rules.
Yeah. Like,
but
yeah,
it's hard because you play two different roles for that one person.
Yeah.
And to specify that is really hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, okay, this is my hat now, and then this is my hat.
Yeah, and it probably confuses them, right? Because they're like, they meet with me, they're like, oh, she's so cool, she's really chill. And then they assume that I'm going to be really chill about this late assignment that they're turning in. And they're like, oh, you know, I was out at this concert till 1 a.m. And so, sorry, I can't get this in till this date. And I'm like, fine, that's fine. Like, here's my late policy. And I hate that because it's like, I want people to still like me, and that's probably a problem, right? I want everybody to like me, but I do have to enforce those things. So I am aware that that's something that I have to do. I don't love to do it, but it's something I have to do.
I think that's a key word, awareness. That is definitely something people overlook. Now, how do you usually cope with a conflict in a work environment? Is there someone that you go to or a strategy you use?
So I think handling conflict in a work environment, like I have certain colleagues that I'm really close with that are in this, they think similarly to me. So they know they understand my strengths, but they also understand my weaknesses. And it normally, like this colleague, for instance, I won't name names, like this person has obviously had the same weaknesses as me, but they've also taken and polished those weaknesses up and turned them into strengths. So they understand where I'm coming from and help me improve what weaknesses I may have, so they can give me the best advice. And so
I think someone that's honest with you too. Like, I think
that's important, is honesty. And
which is weird because in class we talked about what is it called? Criticism, like effective criticism.
Yes, constructive criticism.
Well, actually, that's more that's more negative, because they're giving you like, oh, it's like the sandwich. Like, we're giving you a positive, negative in the middle, and then another positive. Well, the only thing you can think about is the negative.
Yes.
So I think someone that's able to be honest with you, but say it in a way that you understand, is more beneficial than criticizing what you're doing. Like, oh, I would never do it like that.
Yeah.
Like, okay, let me mold you into the way that you want to be. Not the same person, obviously, because you guys are different. But like, okay, I've learned this. I have these skills. Let me help you with the skills that you need from mine.
No, I agree with you. And in fact, I think for me, a big weakness of mine initially, as someone, going into my career maybe 10 years ago, was finding like-minded people to just give me praise and not giving me that criticism that I needed. We as human beings, I think, tend to seek out people who are going to be like, oh, it's okay, everything's...
The lifter-upper of people.
Yeah, the cupcake and rainbow person that's just, everything's cupcakes and rainbows, like Poppy off of Trolls. Everything's good, positive, and I'm very much that way, and which isn't helpful to some people. But that's been a weakness for me, is trying to give constructive criticism, or not constructive, we talked about this, effective criticism to other people, because I don't want people to feel bad about themselves. But something I realize is that I need to give effective criticism, because I'm doing them a disservice. Like, for instance, grading, right? You're grading somebody and there's no constructive criticism to give them because they didn't do very well. And you do need to give them some effective criticism so that they can be better, so that they can make, that's why they're here at school, is to learn something. And so I have to give effective criticism that way.
And I think it's more beneficial to, like, in the book, later on I'll talk about in the podcast, but focusing on the things that you're doing well right now rather than what you're not doing well. Because I feel like if you can strengthen as much as you can, you're going to excel a lot more. If you focus on all the negative things, you're just going to go down and down and feel like you can't do anything.
Yeah. So and you're going to keep screwing up, because they're weaknesses for a reason, and it takes a long time to break those weaknesses.
It does.
Absolutely. It does.
Now, regarding the conflict women face in professional sales, what advice or suggestions would you give them to overcome it?
I think every situation is different. So it's hard to have like a one-way rule. I think, one thing we teach in the program is personality profiling. And I think that's been the biggest help for me, because I am such a sensitive person. And so one thing I think for women to really just look at things in a way that to understand someone else's personality, to understand who they are and how they see things differently. Like I've talked about earlier, we all view the world differently. And just to understand that component helps you so that you don't take offense to other people. It's also important to understand like the political scheme of things, like, where you are on the totem pole, like, so that you're not saying or doing things that are going to screw you up politically. I hate to say, play to politics, but in some shape or form, you kind of have to survive. And so I think understanding like the political scheme of things and also the social scheme, like where you are, like as a female in sales, that can be difficult sometimes. And, you were in this same speaker series as me, where another young woman in professional sales mentioned, leaning into being a female in sales, sometimes you just have to lean into your role. And though, that can be annoying sometimes, it's what works and what's effective.
It's knowing the time and place to know when you can stand up for yourself. And then sometimes where it's like, okay, I can't change this person's opinion on females.
Yes.
It's not the right time. Obviously you don't want to lose a client, but that's something that, you can see. And the more conversations we have, the more strategies we'll come up with, in the future and be like, okay, this worked for me, it may work for you.
Yes, exactly. And you're going to come across that, or you can read, you're talking to someone and they're like, oh yeah, MAGA, Trump, and you're like, okay, this person sees the world this way and maybe that's a bias or whatever. But just knowing what opinions maybe to not bring up about your own political views if you don't agree with them. Speaking politics in sales is probably not a good idea.
I was going to say, in sales, I've like all my professors that I've had, including you, is focus on the job at hand rather than putting personal conflict in there that doesn't need to be. That's the thing that's going to tear you down. Don't bring up stuff that doesn't need to be talked about. Just be like, yep, I'm a woman in this job. Let's get this job done. Let's get the sale done. And that will probably not avoid more conflict, but reduce any conflict that actually arises.
And in fact, now that we're talking about this, I mean, one other thing I'd like to add to this, one thing I learned in Weber State's MBA program is, the antecedents to trust. And what those are is, in order to be a sustainable leader or a sustainable business in the marketplace, so you could consider yourself as your own business, out in a career, right? And in order to sustain, you have to maintain trust with your colleagues, with your boss, and all of those other things. And those antecedents to trust are character, compassion, capability. And that's what makes people trust you. And so if you embody those three things, having character, being moral, having strong values, being capable, being able to do your job and do it right. Just like you said, get down to business. And then I said character, capability, and then compassion. Being a person that's understanding, not this person that's like constantly like, oh, you broke this rule. You're, done. It's important to have compassion for others and understand we make mistakes. And if you can embody those three things, I think you will be able to sustain in whatever job you're in and help with the conflict.
I'll be taking notes for that for sure. 3 things. Everyone start writing them down. Now, before I conducted this interview, I have been listening to Professor Claire Cansfield's podcast on communication process, and I would love to explore this further with you in terms of your personal life. What do you feel like the most of the conflict in your personal life stems from?
Honestly, in my personal life, I'm such a different I handle things differently at like home. Like I'm so much more organized at work than I am in my personal life. And that's just an abstract way of giving you an example that I'm very different in my personal life versus at home on how I handle things. And so in my personal life, I'm very like, with my husband, I avoid a lot of things. I don't want conflict with him, or I avoid a lot of conflict like with my mom, like, because we don't see eye to eye on certain things. And so I tend to like ignore certain things and try to like put these rose colored glasses on and be like, smell the roses. And there's really no roses to smell, but that drives people in my life crazy. And so I can definitely be the stem of the conflict because I don't handle it very well.
Is that something that you have only just realized within your life? Or, like, is it something that somebody has said to you that you've like, oh, actually, yeah, I can see it now?
I think I've recently, maybe like right when I was starting the MBA, I think as you get more life experience, you definitely start to, or hopefully you start to kind of look inwards at yourself. I think it all stemmed, and this, I'm kind of going all over the place, but like we take the personality profiling class in the sales program. That kind of helped me, understand people and that they see things differently, but I still didn't look inwards as much. And then as you go through life, you realize that you're not God's greatest gift to earth. I think in your 20s, you think you are. Truly, like
people, yes.
You don't, and then you have kids and you realize like, hey, I've got to like change these certain things about myself because my kids are going to have to deal with a mom who can't figure her life out or, whatever else. But yeah, repeat that question though, because I might be going off on a tangent.
Is it something that you realized for yourself? Or did someone else tell you about the conflict?
Okay, so yeah, I kind of answered that. So yeah, I think once you get into your 30s, you start to really look inwards after that you have kids and things. Yeah, life experience kind of helps you realize those things.
Because for me, I feel like I've always thought internally, like I thought I did, but I feel like I only did the surface layer.
Yes.
And then I realized when I took this class, like even doing the activities and reading the books, I was like, oh, I haven't even touched the surface.
Yeah.
Like I realized, I was like, I have a lot to learn. And I think that's a thing that I'm really passionate about. I want to learn more, and I never thought I would, but I realized like conflict is a very complex topic.
Yeah.
And it's something I need to control first before I start putting unnecessary expectations on other people. And I've realized that I can't change everyone.
Right.
And that I need to focus on me.
Yes.
And my energy needs to be in me, which is not a selfish thing, but you need to be somewhat selfish to start off with before you worry about conflict with other people.
No, I totally agree with you. I think having that, like you're in this class now, so it's like in the thick of things, but like even like making sure that you revisit the topic even when you are done with your MPC. Because like, for instance, I teach our customer service class and we read Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I swear each semester when I'm grading some of the assignments about what Dale Carnegie says on how to, you know, influence others, I am like, I am not doing these things. Here I am teaching this class. So it's a great reminder for me, but maybe just making sure that you're implementing like a yearly weekend that you maybe read a book about conflict or, you know, watch a TED Talk or something to go, because I think we forget very easily. These things are really easy to talk about, but so much harder to practice.
I really agree. And I think something, even just like you saying that right now, implementing that, and it can even be like a monthly thing. Like if you do an activity and somebody tells you something and you've never realized it, test yourself. Like test, have I improved? Have I done this? Is it better? Because you start to feel more better about conflict of like, okay, we're resolving it in a healthy manner rather than it being like, oh my gosh, this is the 18th time we've talked about this. Like, why is we going round and round in circles? Like, I don't like roller coaster rides and it feels like we're on one.
Exactly.
I think that's amazing. That's definitely something I will implement in my own life. Can you give me an example of one of the times within your personal life when you experienced conflict?
Yeah. So, I think this would come up with any married person, but for me and my husband been married for 9 years. I hope that's correct. But
bump it up to 10.
Bump it up to 10. But, you know, when you marry someone, you're both raised very differently. And me and my husband were raised in two very different households with different rules. And his personality is very like type A, direct. I used to refer to, and he would hate this, but I referred to him as an army sergeant when we first got married, because it was like he just likes to get down to business. And I'm a very sensitive and soft and sometimes sweet, but sweet person. And so, you know, he's pretty aggressive in the way he handles things, and not in a bad way, but just straight to the point. And I consider that aggressive. Not everybody would. But our personalities really clashed in the beginning. And I think that's because I, knew nothing about us having all different personalities. And there's not one way to doing it. You assume, when you're right out of high school, you're like, there's a way to do things and there's not a way, but there's a million ways to do things. And so, yeah, I think just for me in my personal life, it's just, working with different personalities that can cause conflict if you don't know how to, if you don't understand different personalities and, what works for them and what doesn't.
I agree. What have you realized you do in a conflict that may make the conflict worse?
And I noted on this a little bit earlier, but I think for me, it's that avoidance at home. Like at work, I, want to handle it. I'm getting paid to do a job. At home, it's like, oh, you can be a little bit more lazy, right? And so for me, I avoid things. So my husband will bring certain things to my attention and I'll be like, yeah, I'll fix that or whatever. And then I never do. Or I will avoid the conversation altogether. Like, oh, I've had a bad day at work. I don't want to talk about this right now, And so sometimes I think he feels like he's put on a little bit of the back burner, right? Because it's like, oh, she can be this amazing person at work, but then she comes home and she can't even handle a conversation. So I think for me, avoiding. And if I'm being selfish or petty, that can also be, you cannot be selfish or petty if you want to resolve a conflict. You have to seek a win-win situation. And we all get in a petty mindset where, we think we know everything and we don't.
Do you feel like you avoid it because you already know the outcome before it's even happened?
That's a good question.
Or is it something that you feel like he's going to have a certain response in an aggressive way
that
you're like, oh my God,
yes.
I just can't even deal with it?
That's it. Yeah. Okay. I think.
Or doesn't understand it from your point of view. So
he doesn't understand it from my point of view. It's going to be a later on argument because, for him, I think he wants me to see things the way he sees them. And I don't, and I'm not going to say that, oh, I see them and I'm going to do them your way. Cause I'm not like, I can say, I can tell him like, hey, I see why you feel this way because this is how you function. And this is, the environment that your brain lives in. But for me, this is what works for me. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't like that answer. It's like he wants,
it has to be one way.
Yeah. And sometimes it's the other way around, right? Mm-hmm. Where he can be the one that, anyways, I don't want to get too twisted up in words, but yeah, like in this situation, like for me, it's difficult, just because we see things very differently. And sometimes it's even hard to find a compromise.
I agree. I think something that we've talked about in class as well is that we already have a preconceived idea of what's going to happen. Yeah. And that may not be the case.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm terrible at that.
And it's hard because if you've had the same feeling over and over again, it's kind of triggering. You're like, okay, I'm already going to put up my defense mechanism. Let me just put up the wall now. I don't even want to have to deal with it. Last time I already knew what I felt. Yeah. But I think it's giving, maybe a different approach. Like we've talked about in class with people's newly mother-in-laws and stuff like that. Right. Where they're like, oh my gosh, I just don't know what to say. I already know what's going to happen. Yeah. But you may need to just twist a different way of looking at it. Yes. Or something else. But I think it can be damaging on our own self, misjudging something before it even happens. Right. Because in my opinion, we're already putting it into existence. Right. Like we're speaking into existence.
Exactly. No, you're 100% right. And I tend to try to predict the future. Like one of my strengths in our strengths-based selling books is futuristic. So I'm constantly trying to predict the future and it doesn't do me any good.
Hey, if I'm going to be rich and famous on them, let me know. But no. I want to touch on a topic within the podcast that I've listened to from my professor. And that is the definition of whole body listening. So what is your definition of listening with your whole body mean to you?
I think for me, what it sounds like to me is something along the lines of, are you physically present? Are you turned to that person that's communicating with you? Do you have your phone down? Are you, what do they call it? Active listening to that person, showing them, giving them the cues that you're present, because oftentimes, I feel bad because I do this all the time. It's like once a week, my kid's talking to me. She's like, Mom, Mom, Mom. And I'm on my phone trying to listen and do whatever else. And so, I think that this whole body listening, just means that you're present, you're there, and you're showing that with your body as well.
I agree. And I think something as well that's super interesting that I've never really realized before, my professor does it, that I've never seen a professor do before, is he realizes when you speak and answer the question that he's asked, is he will realize that you've said a word or a phrase multiple times. Oh, wow. Which is something that you seem to be either passionate about or you want to learn more. So if I keep saying I'm passionate, and passionate. And he picks that up. He's like, now you've repeated passion. What do you mean by that? Can you explore that? And it might be something I need to get off my chest, or that means that you're highly listening to what somebody says. And that could be an argument. Like if somebody says, I don't feel validated. I don't feel validated. I don't feel validated. There's most of the time, there's the key word of what all they need.
Yeah.
That could be the whole argument already figured out.
Right.
All they need is validation.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because I've never seen somebody do it that many times.
I love that. That makes a lot of sense. It's those cues, that you're getting that they could be giving verbally or non-verbally.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I learned from my professor, Claire Cansfield podcast, that listening with your whole body is picking up on verbal and physical cues, whether that is micro expressions like facial expressions or possibly non-verbal ones. Being fully present in the moment rather than being a defensive listener, which is thinking about our next comment or argument rather than paying attention to the person talking. Listening takes energy, and if you fully listen with your whole body, sometimes you feel drained. But it is a sacrifice you make in order to focus so that the other person feels seen, loved, valued, and respected.
Okay. Yeah. I definitely am a defensive listener where I am just, I think, oh, you asked that because you're insinuating that I did this, and they didn't insinuate that, but that I just take things to that personal level.
I'm a very defensive listener. Like as soon as you say something that I want to touch on, the rest of what you said just goes over the thing, over my head, which is what most of the time they already explain why they thought that, but that's like completely gone in one ear and out the other because all I'm focused on is that one thing that you said that ticked me off that I have to say. And I think that's something that I'm personally working on in like a professional and personal environment, because I feel like a defensive listener is, in the word defensive, like you're already shooting yourself in the foot.
You're already working in that crocodile brain, like fight or flight, and that's not good. Like
it's more damaging than, trying to actually figure it out. And to be honest, that is a problem. And when you have two defensive listeners, well, you're not going anywhere. Yeah. So one person's
I can relate to that. Yes.
It's really hard. When you are in conflict, what do you wish your husband or another person would say or do to help benefit you to resolve a situation?
I think for me, because I am so sensitive, and I'm sure that annoys him, because that can be really annoying when someone
I'm sensitive too. Hey, it's okay.
But for me, I think because he doesn't really sugarcoat anything, so he'll just be like, why didn't you clean the house today? Instead of like considering everything I had done that day, right? Sometimes I wish he would validate me or go, hey, what is it? I know you've worked very hard today, this, that, and the other. I asked you to, do the laundry because I need some underwear. I don't know, just approach it in a way that validates me to where you're not just not considering all the things I had to do that day other than your laundry or cleaning the house, And so I think feeling validated for me is kind of my hot button, or things that would help me so that I don't get into that defense mode, just kind of adding that little sugar. And I know that's probably annoying for someone in his personality style, but I think if we learn to communicate each other based off of our personalities and understand our needs, that helps a ton. So yeah, for me, it's validation.
What do you feel like, how can you teach him what you need? What's something, especially, I'm not married, I'm definitely in a relationship, but what's something that 9 years down the track, how do you explain or get him to be like that without forcing obviously you can't force him and be like, you need to be this type of person, like I expect you to be like that. How do you educate him in the way that this is my need, and you don't have to change the way you say it, just twist, add an extra word or right.
We've had the conversations before, and for him, he's like, that's not me. I don't sugarcoat things or whatever. Initially, like, he's gotten better about it over the years. But when we were first married, it was a really tough landscape to navigate because, we didn't have those conversations. I'd say he's a lot better now and he's learned to do that, but it's taken time. And I think it also takes we need to make sure we're putting our egos down, right? Mm-hmm. Like, even if he doesn't validate me, I'm the one that's choosing to be offended. Mm-hmm. And so it could still fall back on me. I mean, yeah, it'd make it a lot easier if he did validate me. But again, we talked about this earlier. We can't change anybody. And so I could still handle it better, knowing how he is. And I think over time, when, that we've been married, it's gotten a lot better because we have really learned this person will never change in this, the way they deal with this or the way they deal with that. The only thing I can change is myself. But then we talk about self-care and, making sure our needs are met. So then you do, over time, that may drive you crazy to let that tuck under your skin.
Especially when it's only one question. Like, all I need is a little bit of validation.
Right.
Like, oh, I can see, you've cleaned up the whole, I can tell you've had a stressful day at work or whatever else. How about we do it together? Like, you would be like, oh my hallelujah, the lights, like, woohoo.
Yes, exactly.
But it is hard, and I see that it's like, well, I'm not like that. But that's the type of thing, like, you kind of have to make a sacrifice. Like, you both have to give in the middle.
It's a give and take type of situation.
It's the give and take type of situation. And obviously, conflict is not the type of thing that people really want to talk about. And it's like, okay, just, it's easier said than done. Like, oh, be a little bit, don't be as sensitive, or just sugarcoat it a little bit and make you feel better. Like, it's hard when somebody's not ever done that before. But I think we need to obviously move our egos down and be like, I need to give this person this to make the conflict not be like that. Like, my partner said multiple times, like, the tone of voice.
Yes.
And I'll be like, I've never said that. I never say that.
Yeah.
It's like, but the thing about it is they've obviously reacted the way that they have. Like, you're the only one that's talked to them. So you've clearly made them upset, whether they're highly sensitive or not. Just be like, okay, just change it.
Yeah.
And it's honestly, you're not really changing anything. It's not like you have to give them all the money or
because everybody wins, right? I think, and that comes back to my point of we have to put our egos down because it's really easy to get petty and it's really easy to let our ego get in the way. But if we can just play the game a little bit, is how I like to call it. Mm-hmm. If we both can play the game, man, like, everything's great in a relationship. If you understand this person's needs and they understand yours and you both work to find compromise and a win-win, I'd say that's the best way to do it.
And I think compromise and the whole collaboration, like the win-win thing, will never happen unless you fully invest in that person's need.
Oh, absolutely.
It will never.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think the win-win
won't
jump
happen
to that thing. Oh yeah, we want a win-win, but you don't want to do the work before.
Yeah.
That has to be done before you get to that.
I agree with you 100%.
A strategy you could use that I've learned as well that I would love to share with you is to ask your husband 4 questions. Just let him answer them without you saying anything back. I do suggest that you do take notes so that you can reflect on them. This activity has opened my eyes up to how I am in conflict and has helped strengthen my relationships immensely. These questions are: please describe what it is like to communicate with me. What are my greatest strengths as a communicator? What areas of my communication have room for improvement? And what would you request of me as a communicator in the future? What do you think about that activity?
I think it's good. I actually really like it because I think we can tell each other, when we're fighting or arguing, like, you're such a terrible communicator and here's why. And they're telling you, but you're not hearing it because they're attacking you. You're giving them the permission to say, okay, tell me how I am here. And then I think the person who's asking these questions, like myself, like, it'd be good for me to ask my husband these things because I'm asking them, right? And then making sure that I, again, put my ego down and not take a defense stance to it. Because he sees, I don't see how he sees me because I'm not him. And so it's important for me to understand those aspects.
And you can, even the last question, what do you request of me in a communicator? I asked this question with a teammate. I asked the question with my mom, and I asked my partner. And honestly, it opened my eyes up immensely. Like the first thing they said is, when you're upset, if homework's frustrating you, let us know in advance so that we know what your mindset is then. So it's like, okay, you need space before then. This is not going to be an effective conversation.
Right.
Let them know ahead of time rather than them finding out as soon as I start blaming them when they have nothing to do with it. Like they're not the one that put my homework and me getting frustrated with it. Like it really opened up my eyes to be like, okay, these are my strengths and I need to keep doing that. This is effective.
Yeah.
But it really opened my eyes to like the improvement and the same as you, not being so defensive. Like this is the reality and I can't do anything about it other than
this is how they're seeing how I communicate.
Yep.
I can't change that. And so I can't change how they see it now. So I need to make sure that I'm fulfilling whatever needs they need me to make in order to be seen as a better communicator through their lenses.
Mm-hmm. And I do request all the people that are listening right now is when you do ask these questions at the end, just thank them for being so open and honest and that you do appreciate it. I think that will go a long way because they also feel heard that you've listened to every single one of the answers as well.
Yeah, I like that.
Now, the final question, how do you think you can see beautiful conflict with a conflict within your life?
That's a good question. I'd say, how do I think I can see beautiful conflict within a conflict of your life? Mm-hmm. So for instance, me and my mother, growing up, we didn't see eye to eye, and over the years we've become best friends, but in some aspects I think I've been that avoidant personality with her to not for my own self. And what I mean by that is certain beliefs that she has, right? I don't necessarily believe them, but I just avoid the conversations altogether when she brings them up. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't allow me to be myself. And so I've finally been able to be myself with my mom, and we still get along really well. Mm-hmm. And although like it was cringy to have to go through it, it's beautiful now because now I can be myself with my mom, and it may not make her the happiest person in the world, but she seems to still love and accept me for me. Mm-hmm. And that's beautiful to me because I feel like for once in my life, I'm able to be myself around my mom. And that's, my mom's my best friend. And so I think I never saw that, we could go from where we were to where we are now as far as our relationship goes. So it's great.
See that, not work through that conflict rather than it letting you guys break.
Yeah, exactly. Working through it too, because I think I'd hold a grudge if I was to continue to just avoid the conversation altogether. I think we wouldn't be as close as we are. And now we are as close as we are. And it's because we can be honest with each other. And sometimes that isn't sugar-coated, I like that.
Thank you for being so open and honest with your personal life in regards to conflict. It is not always an easy topic to discuss. I'm so excited to see how beautiful conflict can impact your life positively. Now the tables have turned. Now it's my turn.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Lara, for allowing me to join your Women Can Too podcast. I just have some questions for you now, which I'm excited to hear your insights on.
Thank you for hosting, and let's get these questions underway.
Awesome. Okay. Well, my first question is, what did you think conflict was before you took your class on conflict and mediation?
This is a very interesting question. Now, when I first took this class, honestly, I thought of conflict as only negative. I really didn't think there was even a positive aspect of conflict at all. I was like, okay, arguments, round and round in circles, no one talks, yelling and screaming. Like, I never really thought conflict as even a positive thing anyway.
Right.
And when I first took this class, I took it because I did my undergrad as professional sales, and I really wanted to learn how to navigate a conflict scenarios in a workplace. However, and be able to overcome them. However, I didn't even realize that the whole class was actual personal conflict.
Oh.
Which is something I have never even realized that conflict could be, you could have it within yourself. So kind of opened my eye up to a side, like I had mentioned before in the podcast. Like, I feel like I touched the surface of it, but I really didn't. Yeah. And now going to the class, I dug a lot deeper because it's a very complex topic.
Yeah, no, I definitely can see that. I've learned a whole lot from just our conversation today. How did you arrive at seeing conflict as beautiful conflict? Fun fact, that's the title of our episode today. Yes.
Now, the reason I came up with beautiful conflict, I wanted something that was eye-catching, that people would, like you had said when I first mentioned it, I don't see conflict as beautiful.
Right.
And that's where I was like, you know what? Yes, most people don't, but there is such a positive side to conflict.
Absolutely.
That it happened, that you learn from it. I really do agree with that, and I see things very differently, which is why I was like, that's a good topic. But I also thought Permission to Feel by Mark Brackett, which explores the power of emotional intelligence to achieve well-being and success. And also our second book that we read in class was Autonomy of Peace by the Arbringer Institute, which investigates resolving the heart of conflict. I didn't realize that these books and this class and the conversation I had, both within and outside the class, has pointed me in the direction that conflict is not all bad. And even seeing it in this way, it has led to positive and empowering transformations, both together and individually. This potential to see conflict in a different light for individuals to study themselves, to become familiar with the communication process is so powerful. The power of this change for me to see conflict differently is indescribable, yet so beautiful, which is how I arrived at the name Beautiful Conflict.
I love that. So you will be entering the workforce soon, and I am keen to find out what your major takeaways are from your master's class in conflict and mediation that you can use in the workplace setting.
Now, this is a question that we have touched on a little bit in class, but obviously we talk about a lot of personal stuff. So this question for me has made me think how I can take the personal aspects of what we've talked about in the class and the books and put that into the work scenario. And the first one I learned from the book is to make sure that I keep peace within my heart, even when others are giving you a reason not to. I think that's something that a lot of people think. Well, I mean, it's a hard thing as well, because I even mentioned it to my mom. Like, when we get frustrated, we're like, why does that person just do that? Or like even the shopping cart, like, if, to bring it outside of a work thing, but like, if the people didn't put the shopping cart back, I'm like, oh my gosh, it takes 2 seconds out of your day. Like, it could be the same with the work. Like, why can't someone just have their desk like super nice, or just, use their manners? It's something that you need to have peace within your heart, that person may not even realize that they don't do that.
Right.
Or realize the benefit. There's other ways of showing people how to do something without fully changing them.
Yeah.
And I think being an example is the very first one. The next one is the object versus person. I think this is something that I personally need to be better at and to transition into the workplace, that when I'm talking to somebody that may have a completely different view, I might, like you mentioned before, like political stuff, they're still a person.
Right.
Don't treat them any different. They still have feelings. They still have emotions. They still have like everything the same as me. They still have reactions, everything. Everyone's not perfect, and I need to imagine, see them as a person and not a brick wall. I'm like, okay,
oh, they voted for this person. Oh my gosh, I can't even talk to them again.
Like, exactly. Or, like if someone's being sensitive, it's like, that's them.
Yeah.
You can't
We don't know their upbringing or, you know, why they are sensitive. It could be a really sad reasoning. Maybe their mom died or, you know, I agree with you for sure.
And I think it's hard to remind ourselves, but honestly, it's important to remind ourselves because otherwise we're wasting energy on things that don't matter.
Right.
Like, it doesn't matter at all. And honestly, you would rather, like the saying, treat people like you want to be treated. You want other people to treat you like a person and not an object, so don't do the same.
Right. Absolutely.
Another one is write a letter to yourself. Even if the letter doesn't actually go to the other person, it could be a useful tool for reflection. So if something happens in a work environment, write a letter to yourself. You might actually realize that you're the problem. And I think it's something that I think it's a good journaling thing for a work environment because you obviously don't want to bring something up. Like if someone's being really rude to you and really obnoxious, unless it's something you need to go to like HR about.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my God, I just get ticked off because of this. If you write it down and you didn't go to someone, because obviously you don't want to make it like a massive, like whole team thing. Like everyone knows the problem. Like, oh, I agree too. You know, you don't want to create a hostile environment. But I think that's a good self-tool first to realize what you've done. Yeah. If you can't talk to somebody. Another one is, like I mentioned before, we can't make others change. We can only invite them to change. And learning we need to change first. Absolutely. Another one is the influence pyramid. We need to shift our mindset from spending more time on helping things that go right rather than dealing with things that go wrong. Mm-hmm. And this is something I will definitely lean more into in the future with professional sales and getting into the workforce is that, you know, like professional sales, you're going to hear the word no, but you just need to focus on what you're doing right, and that will feed into helping you overcome the wrong things that happen.
Absolutely. I like that. Well, how has this class impacted your personal life regarding conflict?
Honestly, I see conflict more now than I did before taking this class.
I'm sure.
Like, I think it's everywhere. I'm like, oh my goodness. Which is, I feel like something that's a really good thing because I might have been avoiding it the whole entire time. Like as soon as I realize someone's said something, I'm like, oh my gosh, no, I just tune it out. I really do think it's extremely important to learn about our personal life of conflict because, like I said before, awareness is a huge thing. And sometimes we need to change ourselves before, you know, we start blaming others or trying to change other people.
Yeah, that's all. I mean, all we can change is ourselves, right? So
I also learned we all want our lives to be filled with healthy relationships, compassion, and a sense of purpose that we can make happen. It starts with the permission to feel, which is the first step of the process. This is a powerful quote I took from Permission to Feel book, and I've realized that being in tune with your emotions and allowing time for it will benefit your life in so many tremendous ways. I also have now realized that I can better improve in conflict situations, whether that is being a whole body listener, asking open and honest questions, which do not limit the way the person can respond, or asking the questions we don't already know the answer to. A few questions which I have started to use to help benefit me to understand how other people feel in a conflict scenario, help me understand what was that like for you. And I think these are questions that I'm, you know, teaching more people about, especially with my parents or in a work scenario. The very key questions. There's a lot more, but they're just a couple. Another is together as being whole body listeners. You might be able to pick up on certain words that they have repeated, which may hold a strong level of importance. That could be a key learning to realize how they feel or what they need from you.
Yeah, that's something I've definitely learned from you today, was, you know, that whole body listening, you know, and being able to, you really are listening if you're picking up on those cues. And I really appreciate that because that's something I've never really considered and made me realize that I have a lot more better full whole body listening to do. I knew a lot about active listening, but that just takes it to a whole nother level. So I really like that.
And I've never, like, on that as well, is when I listened to the podcast and they said that it can be exhausting, I was like, yes, amen, it can be exhausting. But I realized that I didn't realize the benefit for the other person.
Oh, yeah,
like,
absolutely.
That they feel seen, respected, heard. Like, they're so important.
Yes.
And that's from you taking time to fully listen.
Yes. But you're right. It's exhausting, but really 100%, like, it's going to make your relationship better. You're going to fight less. There's going to be less conflict. Like, I love that. That's a great takeaway.
You'll pick up on so many things you didn't before. And that's definitely something we both have to work on, is not be defensive listeners.
Yes, exactly. Well, my final question for you tonight is, what are some strategies you will be using after taking this class to help you in the future with your personal conflict?
What a great question. Personally, I will be prioritizing time during the week, the day, or the month to complete self-care, as you get more energy from it than if you were to just use the energy you had before it.
That is so important, self-care. Like, you've got to take care of yourself if you're going to be using all that energy to listen to people and, avoid conflict, or not avoid conflict, but,
hone into
conflict, I should say. Yes, no, that's super important. I love that.
However, my conflict needs to be something that allows me to completely immerse myself in it, compared to still focusing on what I have left to do or issues around me. And that's still something I've need to find, because I use YouTube and vlogs, but I'm still thinking about other things. Like, I need to find whether that's journaling, meditation. Yeah. I need to find something, and everyone, I'll be interested to hear what other people have for their self-care, because it might be something that can help me too. So
I love that.
Please comment down below. What was beautiful is that I took this class and I wanted to learn more about conflict. And now I'm able to recognize how I can improve to better the conflict situations I face, so that I can see and feel beautiful conflict.
Awesome.
For my own personal conflict, I will be finding time to meditate with meditation cards, which I will be hopefully purchasing, and also complete the 3-page mind dump to help me realize emotions, worries, or find out more about myself when I review it.
I love that. I think I'm going to take some of this action plan with me as well. Just speaking with you today, I think it's really helped me realize all of these things that I could be doing better. You go through school and you get these degrees, and you just think sometimes that we get the ego to us that we're the best at everything and we know how to handle conflict. And today made me realize really that I don't. So I'm excited to take exactly, some of your action items with me today as well.
Well, that's good. So everyone, don't be defensive, listeners. Write a couple of things down, pick 3 people or 1 person and ask those 4 important questions. You can do a mind dump and find self-care so that you can have more energy for yourself. Thank you so much, Paige, for taking the time to interview. Do you have any final words or any thoughts?
I think we've hashed this out. I'm ready to go tackle some of these action items.
Hey, same. Let's get going.
Okay.
Beautiful conflict, here we come.
Now that wraps up our 3rd episode on Women Can Too. I hope you've all loved hearing Paige's insights, as I have loved the opportunity to interview her, as it's been a long time coming. It was such a special episode that explores conflict, and that conflict can be beautiful. Thank you again, Paige, for joining the podcast today. Something for you all to think about for the next episode is, do you see conflict in a different light? Give yourself a minute to ask yourself that question and unpack it a little. After that, ask yourself if you have self-awareness, especially in conflict. Challenge yourself to use open and honest questions when you experience conflict, and watch it change for you and the other person. If you feel like dropping a comment down below on what you found, I would love to hear them and discuss it more. So thanks for listening, and remember, women can too. Until next time, be safe and keep on smiling.